Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so yesterday, as million things were happening at the same time, we also did get the information for Sersi and for Icarus. If we didn't see it here, we can read it in game, and let's break it down. Let's take a look at what these champions seem to be about. However, as we carry on, please keep in mind that this is just their ability descriptions. It by no means is an accurate kind of like prediction whether these champions are going to be amazing or bad, because it's one thing to read these abilities, then it's another thing to see them in game, to play with these champions ourselves, so on and so forth. So we can have an idea what these champions are going to be about and how they're going to be played, but this by no means can be some sort of conclusive I don't know, prediction of their quality overall. Right, so Sersi is a cosmic champion. Her prestige is good. It's nothing crazy. It's like, standard prestige for the newer champions. She will have glancing mechanics. Transmutation's kind of her main currency. She can go unblockable, has true damage, fury buffs, and incinerate. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that. Now, I'm not going to read everything word by word. What you need to know, she's susceptible to stagger and fate seal, as most of the cosmic champions are. Currently, poison and damage over time effects in general are going to be quite useful against her, and heal reversal as well. Even though heal reversal still, I'm not entirely sure how it will work with this. Sersi's control of matter prevents her regeneration rate from being lowered below 0. So we'll see how that exactly works, but it's a useful thing. Offensively, it rarely comes into play. Defensively, just means she's going to be slightly harder under some circumstances to, cheese or stuff like that. Now let's move on to the glancing stuff. Taking damage equal to or more than 120% of the opponent's attack rating in a single hit activates a glancing buff for 10 seconds. Now that is a problem, because whenever you crit, I believe this will trigger basically. Or if you have like some fury buffs and stuff like that. So I do expect this to trigger fairly frequently. And it lasts 10 seconds. While this buff is active, gain a 100% chance for incoming attacks to glance. Glance hits cannot be critical, deal 50% reduced damage, and suffer 100% of ability accuracy reduction. This effect then goes on cooldown for 7 seconds. Okay. Charging a heavy attack has 100% chance to activate glancing buff for 10 seconds, so that's how you're going to get it up offensively most of the time. And glancing buffs are paused for 4 seconds during Sersi's special attacks. Now, luckily, the first important thing is that this is an actual buff, so Mystic champions will be able to get rid of it. So that is a definite upside, whereas as of right now, most of the champions that we have to deal with glancing on nodes are just like passive effects that we can't do anything about. But since it's a buff, a plethora of Mystic champions will have more decent, suitable time countering it. Other than that, again, damage over time effects obviously is going to be something that is quite important here. And then on top of that, just hitting whilst it's on cooldown. It's quite impossible to see exactly how problematic this is going to be, but this immediately smells like it's going to be annoying to fight her. The fact that she can glance does not necessarily mean that she's going to be incredibly annoying defender. We can take a look at Storm Pyramid X. She has very potent glancing abilities, but she isn't wildly recognized as like some real trouble defender. Part of the reason being is because glancing is disabled for special attacks, and special attacks cannot glance against Storm Pyramid X. That's easy, but here that reason could be the fact that it's a buff and it has a cooldown. Now let's move on to transmutation buffs. Transmutation buffs are indefinite and reduce the duration of bleed, shocks, incinerates, and heal blocks by 30%, max 90%. Transmutation buffs that exceed maximum last 8 seconds. Now I think this is actually going to be largely defensive ability, because when you reduce the duration of something, you still leave the full damage, and even if you reduce the duration of incredibly potent bleed by 90%, so long as 1 or 2 ticks squeeze through, you're going to be taking quite a lot of damage. I think the offensive use of this is probably going to function against heal blocks. She will be able to kind of deal with timed heal blocks if you ever see them. But when it comes to bleed, shocks, and incinerates, I think this is mainly going to function again defensively, just so there are less good counters against her. I don't think we're going to see a lot of offensive use. It's still not a full immunity. It doesn't reduce the damage by 90%, which would be better, but it reduces the duration. But for that shorter duration, you get full damage, which still can hurt a lot. So then, gain a transmutation buff when Sersi's glancing buff is activated. Gain an additional transmutation buff if the glancing buff activates due to being struck. Okay, so charge heavy, gain a transmutation buff, for instance. Gain a transmutation buff on a medium combo ender. Get an additional transmutation buff whilst the glancing buff is active. So what you want to do is parry, drop a heavy, go for a medium combo finish, gain a few more buffs, something like that. So you'll be building them fairly organically, it seems. Then gain a transmutation buff when an armor up is triggered on either champion or when inflicted with special lock. Okay, fair play. So that's how we gain them. And we're going to be using them mainly with special attacks. Far from opponent on special attacks. Far from opponent. While at or above one transmutation buff, gain an unblockable buff for 2.75 seconds. So if you throw special from a distance, all specials are unblockable, which is also majority of the time how it is going to happen when you are facing her, I think. So there is that. And gain 697 attack rating for each armor up on either champion for the duration of the special attack. You know, fair play. Now let's move on to special one. Close to the opponent, gain a true damage buff, ignoring armor and resistance for 12 seconds. Consume one transmutation buff to extend the duration of this buff by 9 seconds. True damage is overall, though, one of the more useless true buffs. All of true sense, true accuracy, true strike, true everything is generally wildly more useful than true damage. It can be helpful, but it's not all that. Far from the opponent, inflict a stun debuff for 2 seconds. Consume one transmutation buff to refresh all personal fury and true damage buffs. Fair play. So if you throw it from distance, you can stun the opponent, refresh your fury buffs. How do you get your fury buffs? Special 2, close to the opponent. Gain a fury buff, increasing attack rating by 697 for 24 seconds. Consume all transmutation buffs and gain additional fury for each transmutation buff consumed. Max 15 stacks. So 697, looking at her base attack, would be 25%-ish. 30%-ish, something like that. 25-30% fury. You can get 15 of them. So that could... well, that is quite clearly going to be your main source of kind of like consistent damage. Drop your level 2s, build this up, 24 seconds, quite decent amount of time. Then you can refresh it with a level 1. So the idea probably would be build up to nearly 3 bars of power, drop this, gain as many furies as you can, then build up to nearly 2 bars of power, refresh, then do level 2 and things like that. So you can probably get to those 15 fairly efficiently. Also, far from opponent, regenerate 5% of the damage dealt. Consume all transmutation buffs for additional 3% of each transmutation buff consumed. Now, this one is a bit tricky. The damage dealt is not quite clear to me. It's like, is it all damage that you go taken, or is it missing health? If it is missing health, oh no, of the special attack damage dealt. It's still not all that much. And if you can, I don't know. I don't know how good this region is going to feel. Because, well, I guess it depends how hard the special attack is going to hit. But this is one of those things that's very hard to comment on. Because, as we know, Purgatory, for instance, has very similar effect. And she hardly reaches. On the level 1, it's really not good. So we're going to have to see whether this is strong region or not. Because it's very hard to say at the moment. Also, on the last hit, deal an additional 30% of damage dealt as a burst of energy damage, which is fair enough, a bit more damage increase. Then we have special 3, inflict an incinerate debuff, dealing 1000 energy damage over 12 seconds. Incinerate debuffs also remove perfect block chance. Cool. Inflict additional incinerate debuff for each transmutation buff consumed throughout the fight, max 25. So this is kind of like a Killmonger type of ability, but it doesn't seem to be once per fight. So in longer fights, you might be maybe better off dropping some juicy level 3s with 26 incinerates. But even with 26 incinerates, it doesn't seem like you're going to be doing that much damage. Unless other damage modifiers are playing, like Fury buffs. So, we'll see how useful this is. Also, signature ability. While Sersi glancing buff is active, glance hits grants a regeneration buff healing 15% of damage taken per transmutation over 3 seconds. This ability activates before checking armor and resistances and cannot be triggered by blocking. Transmutation buffs that exceed the maximum do not count towards this ability. Still could be quite hefty damage mitigation there. And gain a power gain buff generating 15% of bar of power over 1.5 seconds each time Sersi's Fury or glancing buffs expire or are nullified. Now this could be much more annoying for Mystic champions who are nullifying her glancing buffs all the time or Furies if she gets to them. And that's all. I can definitely see quite a lot of defensive potential. On paper, I feel as if though the ability descriptions are a bit more complex than they're going to feel in actually playing her. I don't think it's going to be all that tricky to use her. Her offensive uses and capabilities, I don't really see them. I don't really see what she brings to the table. You know, she gains buffs. Every cosmic champion gains buffs. She can access incinerates with her level 3 exclusively. It's kind of quite bad. 2 damage, neat. She can regen some. Fine, but they just released champion like Null, who regens throughout the entire fight consistently without doing anything, with like Liquid Courage Double Edge Masteries. Let's go over her synergies a bit. So, Tunnel partner with Icarus. Sersi transmutation buffs grant 10% energy resistance and reduce opponent's energy resistance by 3%. Transmutation buffs that exceed do not count the ability. Cool, so she can gain energy resistance and make opponent take more energy damage. Icarus energized buffs grant 5% energy resistance and opponent, yeah, basically similar thing. So that's kind of like make them tankier against energy damage and make them do more energy damage. With Hercules, special hits that break through an opponent's block with an unblockable buff become guaranteed critical hits. And that's nothing too special, I think. I mean, it could be neat on level 2, I guess, but... Feat of Strength, gain 1 indefinite strength for every 10 hits in combo meta. I guess it helps Hercules to be ramped up a bit easier, but it's by no means a must-have synergy for Hercules either. With Spider Ham, 60% chance to gain unstoppable buff for 6 seconds when a glancing buff expires. Okay, that can be useful. Spider Ham, while unblockable, activating a special attack to place additional Porker Poppers if the opponent is down. Now, this is a stupid synergy. So in order to benefit from this, you need opponent with a town debuff active. You need to go unblockable. That means you need triggers that evade. I don't like this at all. I think it's quite bad synergy to be honest. I don't think this is very useful at all. And with Invisible Woman, it's a solo synergy. Transmutation buffs grant 150 block proficiency. Cool, so she can get tankier. And with Captain America's solo synergy, start the fight with an indefinite armor up, increasing armor rating by 60. Now that's pathetic armor up, but it does help her by giving her also a transmutation buff, and just having an armor up can be useful at times. So I kind of like this synergy. Obviously that armor up is purely symbolic, but you know, it's still quite beneficial. Right. Do I think she's going to be really, really good champion by reading it? No, I don't. She could be defensive powerhouse. She could be that. Offensively, if her numbers are bonkers, maybe. But I just don't see it. Offensively, she reads quite similar like America Chavez. There's a lot of fluff, and there are some things happening, and there are some things that change the damage and things like that. But at the end of the day, she doesn't really do anything. She doesn't like bypass away, don't miss, or deal with unstoppable, deal with buffs and things like that. She just doesn't do things. She's gonna have, like, you know, a lot of glancing abilities by the read of it. Even listed in her strengths. 2 damage. It's not important most of the time. Critical hits in themselves typically bypass a lot of resistances and armor, and 2 damage is kind of... Most people hardly notice the difference whether you have 2 damage or not in an average fight. Long range specials, how is that a strength? Glancing, yeah, okay, but that's defensive strength. So, hope she's fun. Hope she's interesting to play. She could be, you know, very hard-hitting champion. Maybe if her numbers are good. But when it comes to kind of like a toolbox aspect, does she solve any problem that you are unable to solve with your current champions offensively? I don't think so. Can she be good defensively? Possibly, yeah. Probably like, you know, Alliance War, get maybe some kills. So yeah, I'm not overly excited for Sersi. She gives me some America Chavez vibes, to be honest. She really does. And I don't necessarily mean it in like a super bad way. It's just, it's a champion that has a ton of text and it doesn't do much. It's quite fun to play, hopefully. What do you guys think? Will she be amazing or not so much? See you soon. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about